Nally had never seen so many beings in one place before. Waystation Row 16 was a city folded into a spinning ring of metal, and every corridor pulsed with life. Traders shouted prices across crowded walkways. Cargo drones hummed overhead like fat insects. Somewhere deep in the station, an engine vibrated through the floor and up through her thin legs, and Nally felt all of it. Not just the sound, but the feelings behind every living thing that passed her. That was what it meant to be Pesk. She did not just walk through a crowd. She drowned in it. Joy from a merchant who had closed a deal. Boredom from a dock worker counting the hours. Anger, sharp and red, from two beings arguing over a docking berth. It all poured into Nally like water into a glass. And the glass was very small. She pressed herself against a wall in a lower corridor and closed her enormous dark eyes. Her skin, thin and translucent as wet paper, flickered with pale blue light. That was her glow. Every Pesk had one. It shifted with emotion. Right now, it was dim and unsteady, like a candle in wind. She was 17 cycles old. This was her first solo assignment. Deliver a sealed data archive to the Torvu trade delegation on level 40. Simple work. Safe work. Her mother had said so. She opened her eyes and looked at the directional signs on the wall. They were written in 4 languages, none of them Pesk. She understood the common trade script well enough, but the station map made no sense to her. Level 40 could have been on the other side of Moon for all she knew. Point 2 figures appeared at the end of the corridor. Drevik. Big. Armored. Reptilian. They walked with the heavy rolling gait of high-gravity species, their thick tails swaying behind them. Each one stood nearly 3 times Nally's height. She should have been afraid. Any sensible being would have been afraid. But as they approached, she felt something strange. Calm. A deep, deliberate calm, radiating from both of them like warmth from a heating unit. It wrapped around her empathic senses and quieted the noise of the station. For the first time since she had arrived, the pressure in her chest eased. "You seem lost, little one," the first Drevik said. His voice was low and surprisingly gentle. Nally's glow brightened slightly. "I am looking for the Torva delegation. Level 40. The second Drevik tilted his wide head. Level 40 is far. The main lifts are crowded at this hour, but there is a service corridor that runs directly there. We can show you." Nally hesitated. Her training had included warnings about strangers, but her training had not prepared her for how good it felt to stand near beings who projected such steady peace. After hours of emotional noise battering her from every direction, these two felt like silence. "Thank you," she said. They walked together through a series of narrow corridors that grew quieter and emptier with each turn. The station sounds faded. The crowds disappeared. Nally noticed this, somewhere in the back of her mind, but the calm radiating from her escorts was so thick now that concern could not take root. It slid off her thoughts like rain off glass. They reached a door marked in symbols she did not recognize. The first Drevik placed his wide palm against the panel, and it opened onto a small cargo shuttle, its interior dark and cold. Nally stopped. The calm wavered. Something underneath it, something sharp and oily, leaked through. "This is not." She began to hand close around her arm. It was enormous, rough, and impossibly strong. The calm vanished like a light switching off, and what flooded in to replace it was hunger. Cold, patient, transactional hunger. They had been projecting false emotion the entire time. They knew exactly how Pesk empathy worked, and they had used it like a key in a lock. Nally opened her mouth to scream, but something pressed against her neck. A hiss of compressed air, a cold sting, and the world folded in on itself. Her glow went out. Her legs gave way. The last thing she felt before darkness took her was the satisfaction radiating from the two Drevik, as casual and unremarkable as the feeling of a job completed on schedule. The cargo shuttle detached from Waystation Row 16 14 minutes later. No alarm sounded. No one noticed. 3 days passed before the pest trade vessel that had sent Nally filed a missing courier report with the Accord of Civilized Species. The report was received, logged, and assigned a case number. It was placed in a queue behind 412 other pending matters, most of which were trade disputes. Far away, at a refueling station orbiting a red giant, the human frigate ISS Harrifield sat docked and quiet. In her small office behind the bridge, Lieutenant Ruth Adler reviewed crew rotation schedules and rubbed the old scar on her left palm without thinking about it. Down in the medical bay, Petty Officer Damiabiola was restocking supplies and humming a song her grandmother used to sing. Captain Daniel Osei sat in his quarters reading the daily intelligence digest forwarded by Accord channels. A single line caught his eye. Missing pest courier. Last seen way station row, 16, status pending review. He read it twice. Then he marked it as noted and moved on. The galaxy was full of small tragedies. The Accord had taught him that much. Most of them stayed small. Most of them were forgotten. Most of them ended in a case number in a file that no one ever opened again. But not this one. That this one was going to be different. The room had no windows. That was the first thing Nally understood when she woke. The second thing was the pain. Not her pain, someone else's. It came through the walls like heat, thick and choking, filling her chest and pressing behind her eyes. Somewhere nearby, a being was suffering badly, and Nally's body was doing what pest bodies always did. It was absorbing every bit of it. She curled on her side on the cold metal floor and pressed her hands over her face. Her glow was faint, barely a flicker under her translucent skin. She did not know where she was. She did not know how long she had been unconscious. She knew only that the air tasted like rust and that the gravity was heavier than anything she had ever felt. The door opened. Goro entered the room. He was Drevik, same species as the two who had taken her, but larger, older, and slower in his movements. His scales were dark gray, cracked along the jaw from old fights. He looked at Nally the way a trader looks at cargo. Not with cruelty, with calculation. "You are awake," he said. "Good." Nally tried to speak, but her throat closed. The suffering pouring into her from beyond the walls intensified. She whimpered and pressed herself into the corner. Goro watched this with mild interest. "Your kind is very sensitive," he said. "That is why you are valuable." He explained it simply, without shame. Empathic species were a commodity on the black market. Wealthy clients across the fringe territories paid enormous sums for a living empath, a being who could absorb their stress, their anger, their pain, so they never had to carry it themselves. A personal emotional filter, a luxury item, but empaths had to be broken first. A wild empath fought back. A wild empath tried to close herself off to resist the flood. That was no good for business. The empath needed to be opened completely, cracked like a shell, until she could no longer distinguish her own feelings from anyone else's, until she had no self left to protect. The method was simple. Lock the empath in a room adjacent to beings in extreme distress. Let biology do the work. Goro left. The door sealed shut, and the suffering continued. Nally lost count of the days. Time became a blur of agony that was not hers but lived in her body as if it were. She felt bones breaking that she did not have. She felt terror from beings she could not see. She felt rage and despair and a loneliness so vast it swallowed her whole. Her glow dimmed further. The soft blue-white that had once rippled across her skin like sunlight through water went gray, then dark. She stopped eating the nutrient paste they pushed through a slot in the door. She stopped moving. She lay on the floor and stared at the wall and breathed only because her lungs had not yet learned to quit. She tried to remember her mother's voice. She could not. She tried to remember the color of her homeworld sky. She could not. The only thing left inside her was the endless noise of other beings' pain, filling every space where Nally used to be. Far from Dustmouth, the formal machinery of galactic civilization ground on at its usual pace. The pest trade vessel had escalated its missing courier report to a formal distress petition. This was a serious step. It required acknowledgement from the Accord's regional representative within 10 standard cycles. Ambassador Selleck received the petition in his office aboard the Accord's administrative station. He was tall, thin, insectoid, with clicking mandibles and compound eyes that reflected light like polished stone. He had held his position for 40 years. He had maintained order for 40 years. He had done this by ensuring that nothing ever happened too quickly that he read the petition. He noted the details. A missing pest courier, possible abduction, suspected Drevik syndicate involvement, that he drafted a formal response acknowledging the petition and assigning it for review within the standard 90-cycle assessment period. He attached it to the proper file. He flagged it with the appropriate urgency code, which was the second lowest of 7 levels. Then he moved on to the next item in his queue, which was a trade dispute between 2 species over mineral extraction rights in an asteroid belt. This was the kind of problem Selleck understood. It had numbers. It had precedent. It had a solution that could be negotiated in a conference room without anyone raising their voice. That a missing girl did not have any of those things. 90 cycles. That was 3 months in human time. A lot could happen to a small being in 3 months. A lot could disappear, but the system was the system, and the system worked. It had worked for centuries. It kept the peace. It maintained order. If it occasionally lost a few small beings in the gaps between procedure and justice, well, that was unfortunate. A cost of doing business. A statistical inevitability in a galaxy of trillions. Selleck did not think about Nally. He did not know her name. He knew only a case number. That night, aboard the ISS Harrifield, Petty Officer Dami Abiola was running a routine diagnostic on the medical bay's communication array when a faint signal caught her attention. It was buried in background radiation, almost invisible, flickering like a dying heartbeat. A PESC biodistress beacon. The body of a PESC in extreme physiological shutdown emitted a specific frequency, a biological distress call hardwired into their species by evolution. It was faint. It was far away. Most scanners would have dismissed it as noise. Dami did not dismiss it. She isolated the signal, recorded it, and took it directly to Lieutenant Ruth Adler. Ruth listened. She looked at the signal readout for a long time. Then she picked up the intercom and called the captain. Something small had just become something that mattered. Ruth Adler did not knock before entering the captain's quarters. That alone told Daniel Osei everything he needed to know about what she was carrying. She placed a data pad on his desk and stepped back. The screen showed a waveform, thin, irregular, barely distinguishable from static. Below it, a frequency analysis confirmed what Dami Abiola had suspected. PESC biodistress beacon. Origin point. An unregistered colony in the Verith Fringe. Signal consistent with advanced physiological collapse. How old is the signal? Osei asked. 12 hours at most. The source is still alive. Barely. Osei sat back in his chair. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, with deep lines around his eyes that came not from age, but from years of making decisions that kept people alive or failed to. He read the data twice. Then he pulled up the intelligence digest he had flagged 3 days ago. Missing pest courier. Last seen way station row 16. The Verith Fringe, he said quietly. That is Dustmouth. Ruth nodded. Everyone in the fleet knew about Dustmouth, the same way everyone knew about a bad neighborhood in the city. You knew it existed. You knew what happened there. You stayed away. Drevik Syndicate territory, Osei said. Defended. Armed. Officially non-existent in Accord records. Yes, sir. He looked at her. You already have a plan? I have the beginning of one. Before we get to that, Osei said, let me do this the right way first. He opened a direct channel to the Accord's regional office. Ambassador Selleck answered within minutes. The Torva never slept, as far as anyone could tell. Osei kept his voice even. He presented the intercepted signal, the missing courier report, and the likely location. He requested authorization for a rescue operation under Article 7 of the Accord Charter, which permitted emergency intervention when a sentient life was in immediate danger. Selleck listened without interrupting. When Osei finished, there was a pause. Then the ambassador spoke in his precise, clicking voice. Captain Osei, I appreciate your diligence. However, the Verith Fringe falls outside Accord jurisdiction. The colony you reference does not appear in our territorial registry. Without confirmed jurisdiction, I cannot authorize military action by a provisional member species. A girl is dying, Osei said. That is a strong claim based on an unverified signal. I would recommend submitting your data for analysis. Our technical review board can assess the signal within. How long? 60 cycles is standard for she does not have 60 cycles. She may not have 60 hours. Another pause. When Selleck spoke again, his tone had not changed. It never changed. Captain, I understand your concern. Humans are known for their emotional responses, and in many ways this is admirable. But the Accord functions on principles that have maintained peace for centuries. Unilateral action by a provisional member in sovereign fringe territory would set a dangerous precedent. It could result in sanctions, expulsion. Worse than what is happening to her right now. I'm not in a position to speculate on what is happening to anyone. I can only advise you on what the Accord permits. Osei stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he said, "Thank you, Ambassador," and closed the channel. Ruth was still standing by the door. She had not moved. "Give me the crew," Osei said. 20 minutes later, every member of the ISS Harrowfield's company stood assembled in the main cargo bay. 97 people. Engineers, pilots, medics, tactical officers, cooks, maintenance workers. They stood in uneven rows under the flat white lights and waited. Osei stood in front of them without notes, without a podium, without ceremony. He told them everything. The missing pest girl, the distress signal, Dustmouth, the syndicate. He told them what empathic trafficking was and what it did to its victims. He kept his voice steady and did not look away from their faces. Then he told them what the Accord had said. The silence that followed was heavy. Osei let it sit. "I'm going to be direct with you," he said. "If we do this, we do it alone. No backup, no wusedisastion, no legal protection. The Accord will not help us. They may punish us. Every one of you who participates could face court-martial, loss of rank, or criminal charges under interstellar law." He paused. "There are 3 armed syndicate ships in orbit around Dustmouth. We are 1 frigate. The math is not in our favor." He looked across the rows of faces. Young faces, old faces, faces scarred from a dozen different worlds. "I am not ordering anyone to do this. This is a volunteer operation. If you want to stay behind, there is no shame in it. I mean that." He waited. Nobody moved. Then Dami Abiola, standing near the back, small and quiet in her medical uniform, raised her hand. "Sir, how soon can we leave?" A murmur went through the crew. Then another hand went up. Then 10. Then 50. Then every hand in the bay was raised, and Osei had to press his jaw tight to keep his face steady. Ruth Adler stepped forward. "I will need 6 hours to plan the approach. We will need our 3 best pilots on shuttle rotation. I want a 12-person ground team, volunteers only." Osei nodded. "You have 4 hours. We leave at the start of the next watch." The crew dispersed. The bay filled with the sound of boots and purpose and the quiet, urgent energy of people who had just decided, together, to do something that frightened them because something worse frightened them more. In the medical bay, Dami Abiola laid out a clean bed. She sterilized instruments. She prepared sedatives, nutrient lines, warming blankets. She did not know what condition the girl would be in when they found her, but she was going to be ready. The Harrowfield dropped out of faster-than-light travel like a stone breaking the surface of still water, and for 3 seconds the entire Dustmouth system held its breath. 3 Syndicate patrol ships hung in orbit above the brown, ugly planet. They were Drevik-built, heavy, armored, bristling with weapons designed to crack open asteroids and anything else that got in the way. Each one carried 4 times the firepower of the Harrowfield. Together, they formed a wall of metal and violence that had kept this corner of space untouched for years. Ruth Adler stood on the bridge and looked at the tactical display. 3 red icons, 1 blue. The math had not improved. "Open a broadband channel," she said. "Every frequency. I want every ship in this system to hear this." The communications officer looked at her, then at Captain Osei, who stood behind Ruth with his arms folded. He nodded. The channel opened. Ruth did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "This is Lieutenant Ruth Adler of the ISS Harrowfield. We are here for the pest. You have 1 hour to deliver her to our shuttle unharmed. If you do not, we are coming to get her." There will not be a second message. She cut the channel dot on the surface of Dustmouth. In a facility carved into rock and rusted metal, Goro received the transmission. He played it twice. Then he laughed, a low, grinding sound like stones rubbing together. One human frigate. One. Against 3 warships and a fortified ground installation. He did not bother to reply. The hour passed in silence. The Harrifield drifted at the edge of the system, engines running lights dim. Inside, the crew moved with quiet, focused purpose. The 12-person ground team suited up in the shuttle bay. They checked weapons, sealed armor, tested communication links. Nobody spoke much. There was nothing left to say. Ruth Adler returned to the bridge with 4 minutes remaining. She had changed into tactical gear. The scar on her left palm was hidden under an armored glove. "All hands," she said over the intercom. "Brace." The countdown reached 0. Nothing happened on any syndicate channel. No response. No delivery. No acknowledgement. Ruth looked at the helm officer. "Take us in. Full speed. Straight down the middle." What followed would be studied in military academies for the next 100 years, not because it was brilliant strategy, but because no sane species would have attempted it. The Harrifield accelerated directly toward the gap between 2 of the 3 patrol ships. Not around them. Not in a flanking arc straight at them at combat speed. Close enough that the navigation computer screamed collision warnings that the helm officer manually silenced. The 2 Drevik ships had approximately 11 seconds to decide what to do. Their targeting systems locked on. Their weapons charged. But the Harrifield was moving too fast and too close. Firing at that range meant hitting each other. The human ship was threading the needle between them like a blade between ribs. The Harrifield roared through the gap with less than 40 meters of clearance on either side. Its engine wash, the superheated exhaust of a military-grade fusion drive at full burn, stripped the sensor arrays off both ships like wind peeling bark from a tree. Alarms exploded across both Drevik bridges. Navigational systems went blind. One ship veered hard to starboard and nearly collided with the third. By the time they recovered, the Harrifield was already in low orbit and 3 armored shuttles were falling toward the surface like dropped stones. Ruth led the ground team personally. They hit the facility hard and fast, breaching the main entrance with shaped charges that blew the reinforced doors inward. The Drevik guards inside were big, strong, and heavily armed. They were also completely unprepared for what humans looked like when they were angry. The team moved through the corridors in pairs, covering angles, calling positions, operating with the kind of coordination that only came from training together, eating together, trusting each other with their lives every single day. They did not kill anyone who dropped their weapon and put their hands up. They did not hesitate with anyone who did not. T took 9 minutes to reach the lower levels. Ruth found the cell. It was small, dark, and cold. The door had no handle on the inside. She blew the lock and stepped through. Nally was in the far corner. She was curled into a ball, so tight she looked like a stone. Her skin was gray. Her glow was gone. Completely gone, as if the light inside her had been drained out and thrown away. She was shaking, but not from cold. She was shaking because her body had forgotten how to do anything else. Ruth stopped. She lowered her weapon. She removed her helmet. Then she sat down on the floor, 2 meters away from the girl, and did not move. The rest of the team secured the corridor outside. They could hear distant shouts, the sound of Drevik surrendering, the hum of shuttles holding position overhead. But in the cell, there was only silence and a human woman sitting on a cold floor. "My name is Ruth," she said quietly. "I am from a ship called the Harrifield. We came a very long way to find you." Nally did not look up. She did not move. "You're safe now," Ruth said. "Nobody is going to hurt you again. We're going to take you home." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, deep beneath Nally's gray and lifeless skin, something pulsed. A single flicker of light, faint as a star seen through clouds, that it was enough. Ruth reached for her communicator. "Adler to Harrifield. We have her. Get Abiola ready." Dami Abiola had prepared for many things. She had prepared the bed, the sedatives, the nutrient lines, the warming blankets, the soft lighting. She had prepared her instruments and her medicines and her steady hands. She had not prepared for what Nally looked like when they carried her in. The girl weighed almost nothing. Ruth Adler held her in both arms like something made of glass. And even through the armor, she was careful. Nally's skin had gone from translucent to nearly opaque, a dull, dead gray that no healthy pest should ever show. Her enormous eyes were open, but saw nothing. Her body had curled into itself so tightly that Dammy could count every bone through her skin. There was no glow. None at all. It was like looking at a lamp with the light ripped out. Ruth laid her on the bed gently and stepped back. Her face was flat and controlled, but her hands were shaking. "She has not spoken," Ruth said. "She flinched when I picked her up. I do not think she knows where she is." Dammy nodded and moved to the bedside. She reached out to check Nally's pulse, a simple, automatic gesture she had performed 1,000 times. The moment her fingers touched Nally's wrist, the girl convulsed. A sound came out of her that was not a scream, but something worse. A vibration, a frequency of pure distress that traveled through Dammy's hand and up her arm and settled in her chest like a cold fist. Dammy pulled back. She stood very still. She understood. Nally was an empath. Every emotion Dammy carried, her worry, her urgency, her grief at what she was seeing, was pouring directly into the girl like poison into an open wound. Nally could not filter it. She could not protect herself. Whatever the Drevik had done to her had broken that ability completely. Dammy closed her eyes. She took a breath, then another. She thought about her grandmother's kitchen in Lagos. The smell of rice cooking, the sound of rain on the roof, the feeling of sitting on a wooden stool with her chin on the counter, watching old hands move through flour with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world. She opened her eyes. She felt calm, not forced calm, real calm, deep and warm and true. She reached out again. This time, when her fingers touched Nally's skin, the girl did not convulse. She trembled, but she did not pull away. "There you are," Dammy whispered. "There you are." She ordered everyone out of the medical bay. Every single person. She dimmed the lights until the room was nearly dark. She disconnected every monitor that beeped or hummed. She made the room as quiet as a held breath. Then she sat beside Nally's bed and began to hum.it was a song her grandmother used to sing. No words, just a melody that rose and fell like something breathing. Dammy did not know if Pesk could hear music the way humans did, but she knew that Nally could feel what Dammy felt while singing it. And what Dammy felt was love. Simple, patient, undemanding love. The hours passed. Dammy did not leave. She administered nutrients through a thin line in Nally's arm. She adjusted the blankets when the girl shivered. She kept her own emotions steady, a constant, quiet warmth that wrapped around Nally like a second blanket. IT was the hardest thing Dammy had ever done. Not the medicine, not the sleepless hours, the discipline. Holding herself in a state of calm compassion while sitting next to a broken child required a kind of strength that no training manual covered. Every time her mind wandered toward anger at what had been done, or fear that she was not enough, she pulled herself back. She could not afford those feelings. They were not hers to have right now. Right now, every feeling she carried belonged to Nally. That on the third day, Nally's skin began to change. The dead gray lightened, just slightly, to something closer to its natural state. A faint translucence returned along her fingers. That on the fifth day, a single pulse of light moved through Nally's arm. Pale, barely visible, but real. Dammy cried when she saw it. She cried quietly, and she made sure the tears carried only relief and joy, because that was what Nally needed to feel. That on the eighth day, Nally opened her eyes and looked directly at Dammy for the first time. Her gaze was still broken, still haunted, but there was someone behind it. A person, faint, damaged, but present. That on the 11th day, Nally spoke. "Dammy," she said. Just a name, nothing else. Her voice was thin as paper and rough from disuse. But she said it clearly, and when she did, her skin pulsed with a light that was almost blue. Dammy took her hand and held it. "I am right here, outside the medical bay." The galaxy had begun to react. Ambassador Selleck issued a formal condemnation of the Harrafield's actions. Three elder species released statements of disapproval. The Drevik Syndicate demanded reparations and Captain Osei's arrest. But something the Accord had not expected was also happening. The Pesk homeworld, upon learning the full story of Nally's abduction and rescue, broadcast everything across every open channel in the galaxy. Every detail, every failure of the system, every cycle the Accord had waited while a child was being destroyed, and then other species began to speak. Small species, quiet species, species who had lost their own people to trafficking and exploitation and had filed their own reports and received their own case numbers and waited their own 90 cycles while nothing happened. Decades of silence broke open in a matter of days. The Accord had not expected that either. The chamber of the Accord of civilized species had not been this full in living memory. Representatives from all 312 member species filled the enormous circular hall, a vast space carved from a single asteroid, with tiered seating that rose in rings toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Light came from everywhere and nowhere, designed so that no species felt more illuminated than another. The architects had been very proud of that detail. Equality in lighting, if nothing else. Ambassador Selleck stood at the central podium. He was composed. He was always composed. His compound eyes swept the chamber as he laid out his case with the same precision he brought to everything. The humans had violated sovereign fringe territory. They had damaged Drevik vessels. They had conducted an armed operation without authorization. They had ignored direct guidance from a duly appointed Accord representative. If this behavior went unchecked, it would undermine the very foundations upon which galactic peace had been built. He spoke for 40 minutes. He cited 14 precedents. He referenced 3 treaties. He was thorough, logical, and completely correct about everything except the thing that actually mattered. When he finished, the chamber was quiet. Not the quiet of agreement, the quiet of waiting. Captain Daniel Osei was given 5 minutes to respond. He used 3. He stood at the podium in his uniform. Not his dress uniform, his working one. The one with the coffee stain on the left cuff that he had never managed to get out. He did not bring notes. He did not bring legal counsel. He brought himself. "I will be brief," he said. His voice was low and carried easily through the chamber's acoustics. "Because what I have to say is simple." He looked out at the assembled species. Hundreds of faces, dozens of body plans, beings that breathed different gases and saw different spectrums of light, and had built civilizations older than humanity's written history. A child was taken from a place where she should have been safe. She was carried to a place that your records say does not exist. She was tortured, not quickly, not cleanly, but slowly and deliberately, until there was almost nothing left of her. And you knew. He paused. You all knew. Not the details, maybe not her name, but you knew what happens in places like Dustmouth. You have known for decades. Your committees studied it. Your ambassadors discussed it. Your review boards scheduled it for assessment. And while you studied and discussed and scheduled, children were broken and sold. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. We went and got her. That is all we did. We flew to where she was, and we brought her out. If that is a crime under your Accord, then your Accord protects the wrong people, and we want no part of it. He stepped back from the podium and sat down. The silence that followed lasted nearly a full minute. In a chamber of 312 species, that was an eternity. Sella called for the vote. The motion to censure humanity required a simple majority. 157 votes. The votes came in. 29 species voted to censure. Most of them were elder species with deep trade ties to fringe territories. Some of them had known exactly what happened at Dust Mouth and had decided, long ago, that the cost of knowing was acceptable. 283 species voted against. 41 of those species had never voted against an elder species motion in the entire history of the Accord. Some of them were small species, quiet species, species that had filed their own missing person reports and waited their own 90 cycles. They voted that day not because they loved humans, but because, for the first time, someone had shown them that the silence could be broken. The motion collapsed. Within 3 months, the Accord established its first enforcement body, the Sentient Protection Corps. It had ships, personnel, and a mandate that cut through every layer of bureaucracy that had ever allowed a child to disappear into a filing system. Its founding charter was written in 11 languages, but contained a single human phrase that could not be fully translated into any of them, a phrase that every species in the galaxy learned to recognize, even if they could not pronounce it. Never again. 6 months after the vote, the ISS Harrifield was docked at a supply station for routine maintenance. The crew went about their work the way they always did, quietly, competently, without fuss. They had received no medals. Osei had refused them. He said the job was not finished and would not be finished for a long time. In the observation lounge, Nally sat by the wide, curved window and watched the stars. Her skin was translucent again, and light moved through it in slow, steady waves. Not the bright, innocent glow she had carried before Dust Mouth, but something different. Something that had been through darkness and had chosen, deliberately and with full knowledge of what darkness felt like, to shine anyway. Dammy sat beside her. She was reading a medical journal on her datapad and occasionally humming under her breath without realizing it. It had become a habit. Nally had told her once that her humming felt like sunlight, and after that Dammy could not stop. Ruth Adler walked through the lounge on her way to the bridge. She paused, looked at them both, and nodded once. Nally nodded back. No words were needed. They had said everything that mattered a long time ago on a cold floor in a dark cell. Through the window, a fleet moved in formation, ships from dozens of species, flying together for the first time in galactic history. The first joint patrol of the Sentient Protection Corps. Their hulls caught the starlight and scattered it in every direction. Nally placed her small, translucent hand against the glass. "They came for me," she said softly, "and now they come for everyone." Dammy took her hand and held it. The stars stretched on forever, and for the first time in a very long time, they did not look cold.